In today's video, we have all kinds of news to discuss and some trade rumors involving teams like the Calgary Flames, Edmonton Oilers, and the Philadelphia Flyers. We had an absolutely crazy game this afternoon between the Vancouver Canucks and the Minnesota Wild, featuring 17 goals, 3 hat tricks, and neither team even had 30 shots. We'll discuss the breakdown of that, plus we have some other roster moves, news from the NHL waiver wire, and a signing in Boston who's already come through with his first NHL goal. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. It's been a very interesting news day in the hockey world. Of course, it's a holiday in both Canada and the United States, or at least most of Canada. Not every single Canadian province has a holiday today, but for the vast majority of Canadian provinces, today is Family Day. And of course, I believe it's President's Day to our friends and colleagues down in the United States. So I hope everybody enjoyed their day today, their holiday, and got to take in some of the early NHL action. Games were starting quite early this afternoon and go right through to this evening. So it's been a fun-filled day that way with a nice staggered schedule. News from the NHL waiver wire today. We had 2 players on waivers yesterday. It was Oskar Steen from Boston, Matt Law from Detroit. Neither player was picked up. They both clear waivers, both assigned to the American Hockey League. As I mentioned, we had a couple of things today. There's a few firsts today, including a couple of guys playing their first NHL games at a later, more mature age and getting their first NHL goals. It was quite the sight and certainly something you love to see. The Boston Bruins today, before their game, confirmed the signing of Justin Brazeau, 2-year, 2-way contract, $775,000. Brazeau is definitely what you would classify a true late bloomer in his final year of junior in the Ontario Hockey League, which I believe was in the 18-19 season. He scored over 60 goals. He was a late, just like a late bloomer. I thought maybe he might get drafted, but he didn't. And he ended up getting signed as an undrafted player by the Leafs. Went to the Leafs organization, played his first year, ended up going to the East Coast League for the Newfoundland Growlers affiliate. Had a pretty good season for that league, first pro season. I thought he did all right based on what you can see, that the stats look decent. The next year he played, I think it was around 20 or so American Hockey League games, which I believe would have been like the COVID year when, there's a lot of restrictions and there wasn't as many games going on. But then after that, they let him go. And I'm, not to say he's going to turn into a big superstar. We'll see. But after that, he gets signed by the Bruins, and he's put in the last 2-3 years between the East Coast and American Hockey League. So he'll be the first, I believe, the first player for the Bruins to go through the main East Coast team, work his way up into the AHL team with Providence, and then to the NHL with Boston. So he ended up getting his contract. He's 26 now. It feels like it wasn't that long ago for me, because I remember his final year of junior going into that draft was one of the, I was pretty new to YouTube, and for my first full year covering hockey here on the channel, and I remember talking about him as being one of those potential, late round draft steals. I thought somebody might pick him up, and it never came to be. But he gets signed, gets into his first game today. And not long into the game, gets his first goal, and it was a nice goal too. Taking his big body to the net. He's a big guy, so we'll see if Brazeau can stick in Boston and how things work out for him. Certainly, with the number of players that the Bruins have brought up and given opportunities to lately, obviously I have to check in and see what's going on with a guy like Fabian Lysell, who was a pretty high pick a few years back, and is not even getting a sniff. I mean, if you're a Boston fan or you watch their minor league teams too, I'd love to know what's going on more with him, why he's not even getting a look at the NHL level. Even guys like, there's other prospects too, I'm sure, that are not getting a look, and these guys are older players. But the other example today was Vegas calling up Mason Morelli. I think he actually got called up yesterday, but didn't make his debut until this afternoon. And again, he's another older guy, undrafted player. He's 28 years old, even a few years older than Brazeau, and he gets his first NHL goal today too. So Morelli comes in, like I said, 28. He played 4 years of U.S. college hockey, so he was already a little bit older when he was turning pro. Put in, I believe it's between the East Coast and American Hockey League, about 5 years. This is his first year in the Vegas organization now. Spent the bulk of the season in Henderson in the AHL so far. Gets the call up And here we are. First NHL game, first NHL goal. It just seems to be a trend with these older, late blooming players. So at least they're good things, though. Good stories, good perseverance. For people out there that have dreams and goals and the whole thing of never give up, anything is possible. It makes you, when you see stories like this, believe that's indeed true. And if you do push hard enough and stick with it long enough, that it can happen. Vegas also called up Grigory Denisenko today as well. And the Boston Bruins, just to go back to them for a second here, they also lost defenseman Hampus Lindholm. He didn't, we're not quite clear on the full extent of the injury, but he did leave the game in the third period, didn't return. So we'll see. I know a lot of people think the Bruins, for upgrades before the deadline, they should probably focus most on their left D, maybe a little depth at center. So we'll talk about that a little bit further here as well. And we had a crazy game. I'd like to call it a wild one. The Canucks fans may not like that, but it was a 10-7 game this afternoon. The Minnesota Wild defeated the Vancouver Canucks 10-7. Now, I was not able to watch that game. It was blacked out here in my local region. It was on, I believe it was on Sportsnet West, and because of where I live, I was not able to see it. I was in the restricted zone. So I've only seen some of the highlights, but what a ridiculous game by the looks of this. Neither team even had 30 shots. Both goalies definitely had a bad day. Now, in Vancouver's case, Casey DeSmith was between the pipes. I believe the last 2 goals in Minnesota's case were empty netters. At one point, Vancouver had a 5-2 lead, and then Minnesota got a late second period goal to make it 5-3, and the rest of it happened in the third. Minnesota came out in the third period and had 5 goals in just over 5 minutes. Now, keep in mind, the penalties played a big role today as well. There was lots of power plays, lots of power play goals. The Minnesota Wild had on 4 different occasions, had a 2-man advantage. So I know I want to go back and watch a little bit more of the highlights to see about the officiating, just to see what the calls were like or what have you, because I know there's probably a lot of fans out there not happy. But what a crazy game. For a team like Vancouver, who is heavily considered to be a cup contender, you just you don't have epic meltdowns like that. Obviously you have to think that losing composure played a role. Defensive coverage played a role, but the goals in the third period, a bunch of them were power play goals too. So certainly was a big factor. So absolutely crazy game. I think it was probably since the 1980s that we've seen a game feature 17 goals like that. And in Minnesota's case, that's a franchise record for most goals in the game. They've never had 10 before in their history. So and there's 3 hat tricks in that game as well, I believe, including Miller. Miller had one for Vancouver. Eriksson Ek had one, and I think Kaprizov, if I'm not mistaken. So crazy game for sure. When you look at the score, it's like this is a hockey game, right? Almost looks like a low-scoring football game instead. But crazy one today. In that one. Now, an update as well on the Arizona Coyotes arena situation. I saw an article today from Front Office Sports, who are pretty reliable. They focus a lot on the business side of sports, and some updates on where things are heading in that direction, and some of the big, proponents against the project. For example, we know that a big part of what might be the undoing of Arizona, which is kind of the whole premise of the article, is the NHLPA and the new leader there, Marty Walsh. He's been pretty outspoken about how the Coyotes play in Mullet Arena and the conditions and the size and everything, and he's been pretty against having them play there any longer and wants this resolved ASAP. So we do know that the NHLPA has serious concerns and issues with the setup there and are applying a lot of pressure. Apparently, there's also, because we talked about before, in case you didn't see the other videos or whatnot, but there is a parcel of land that the Coyotes are looking at in northern Phoenix area, which is apparently a great area, but we've heard that before. I don't know the landscape there like the locals would, of course, but based on what we've heard, it sounds like it would be a good spot for an arena, but I don't really, I can't speak to that with a lot of detail and intelligence, because I don't know, because I don't live there, but from what I've heard, it sounds like it. And of course, the way it's where it's government-owned land, and it has to go through an auction, and they had to be approved to be a bidder. We recently seen that apparently they are I think approved to be a bidder. They have to go through an approval process just to bid. And from what we've seen in this article from Front Office Sports, it makes it sound like it's going to be at least 3 months or a little bit better before they can even bid. And right now, it's believed that they'd be the only bidders, but there's also believed to be some resistance, I guess you could say, against the project locally. Again, not to the same extent as before, but one of the big reasons why they lost the vote in Tempe to get that project off the ground was there was one of the big unions there were very much against them and spent a lot of money campaigning to vote against the project. And it's believed that they're also the same union, I believe, campaigning against or having any big projects on that land that they're looking to bid on to be like their people to do the work. So there's a lot of, we're talking about a lot of different construction jobs, pipe fitters, there's a lot of different, labor trade type jobs that would fall under their union that they're obviously lobbying to make sure all of their local people get the jobs that would be coming from doing a major construction project of that nature. So clearly, that's something that's kind of standing against them here as well, between that and the fact that it's going to be at least 3 months before they can even bid. And that's we don't know that somebody's not going to come along and try to outbid them on that land. They may not, but, can they buy themselves enough time to get that? Because even once they get the land successfully bid upon and purchased, there's still a long ways to go. And I don't know that the NHLPA is going to have the patience there. So I'll be curious to see how they handle this. I know, like I said, the PA's made mention of several deadlines being missed before. And I don't know. I'm not sure when we're going to hear the NHL or the PA speak on this publicly again. But it could be a while before we really get anything firm out of the Coyotes, because I don't really, until they can bid on the land, and if that's going to be, probably in the May, June area, I don't know how they could possibly really put together a plan that's considered firm and solid before that, because they can't do that if they don't own the land. They can have their plans in place, but to call it solid without owning the land would be impossible. So we'll see when we know more on that, but that's the latest in that scenario. When it comes to the trade talk around the league, of course, we know the trade deadline's not far away. Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick had a new 32 Thoughts podcast come out this morning. Talked about a variety of things, including the Oilers. They made it known in the podcast today that the Edmonton Oilers are very, very unlikely at this point to consider moving for a goaltender. We know the Oilers definitely have a few assets they can include. They have a first-round pick they could trade. They have some young prospects that might be intriguing to other teams. But at the same time, to bring in a player on their roster, they're going to likely have to have some money go out. So from a cap perspective, it's going to be tricky. In the way Stuart Skinner and Calvin Pickard have played, it's no longer their top concern. And because of that, it's probably going to be very, very challenging to add any kind of depth at the position. And it's not really a major issue for them right now. Most likely their biggest thing would be to probably add, if they can, another forward and maybe another D to add some more depth. Obviously, there's been times this year when secondary scoring has been a problem for the Oilers. It's still believed, according to Elliot Friedman, that one of their top targets, if he's available, because we don't know 100%, would be Jake Gensel. So I do think their main target here will be landing a top forward, someone who can play at least in their top 9, preferably in their top 6, and add another scoring punch. Maybe a depth defenseman in there as well if they can swing it, and that's where things stand. Don't expect a goalie to come in, although I honestly do wonder about the possibility about them moving Jack Campbell. I mean, that contract at the NHL is still daunting, and he's played a lot better at the American Hockey League. He's had good stretches there, so there's certainly reason for optimism, so to speak. Have another 3 years at $5 million. I don't know. I mean, teams are going to still probably want a sweetener on that, right? I mean, who's to say that they bring him in and let's say he plays back in the NHL? Will he be the Jack Campbell the Oilers thought they were getting? It's risky, right? So I can imagine they would probably try, because I mean, at this point, if they're not going to call him back up, they'd probably prefer to move on. And, are they going to want to go back into this next year with a new, new Skinner Campbell tandem again? And, see it flop again. Like, they probably don't want to do that. So no guarantee they can move Campbell, of course, like I said, because of the contract, but I would imagine they will indeed try. The latest on Noah Hanifin. It seems like two of the teams, we talked yesterday about a potential huge deal that Jeff Marinka brought up between the Flames and Devils, because we know the Devils very keen on Jacob Markstrom, and that deal is reportedly still being discussed and trying to be figured out. But, he had made mention of a defenseman being included as well because of the long-term injury situation to Dougie Hamilton and the fact that the Devils' blue line really could use some more experience and some help back there. But maybe it's not Hanifin as their target. Maybe they go elsewhere, because a couple of the other teams that are heavily rumored to be very much in on Hanifin is the Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers. Of course, two top teams in the Atlantic Division vying for his services. We know the Bruins have liked this player for a long, long time. Elliot Friedman's made it clear that Hanifin is not going to re-sign with the Calgary Flames. He's definitely going to market. And by market, I believe he means the trade market, possibly the free agent market in the summer. It depends on how he's traded. I think the Bruins would definitely prefer, if they're going to pick up a guy like this, to extend him and keep him. Florida probably would too, but might be more willing to take the rental situation in a go-for-it type of year. We know how aggressive Bill Zito has been, and after making the finals last year and having a good start to the regular season, I suspect we're going to see them do it again. The problem is both of these teams are somewhat low on draft capital. The Boston Bruins don't have a first-round pick this year, or a second or a third for that matter. Next year they have a condition tied to their first rounder that they may not be able to trade that pick, so they're limited that way. They're already drafted players. Would they be willing to part with a youngster like Matt Poitras? I mean, I wouldn't think they'd want to, but if it means improving the team enough, is that something they're willing to consider? Would they move Jake DeBrusk, who's certainly in a unknown situation with his contract? I know there's been mutual desire to stay, but he hasn't had the best season. Would they consider trading DeBrusk? Like, something like that might have to be the package that they offer, because I don't know that they can really go in with much else in terms of picks and prospects. I mean, I mentioned Fabian Lysell not getting much of an opportunity, so I would be willing to say that Boston would include him if they could, but are the Flames going to have interest, or anybody else for that matter? I don't know, because it seems like he's not really getting options here to further call up. So maybe he's not ready and not showing signs of really working out here. In Florida's case, there's been some rumblings about maybe including Anton Lundell. Some are skeptical, not 100% sure they want to do that, but at the same time, an opportunity to make your decor that much stronger might be too much to pass up. They also don't have a first round pick until 2026. They moved a lot of picks in the past year or two trying to make these moves here to go for it. So they're low on draft picks too. It's going to have to be something off the roster or off their prospects to make something like this something like this happen. And Lundell, I think, might be the preferred target here by the Flames. So is that something that they would do? I don't know, but that's likely what they're going to be offering. So we'll see how those teams compare to other teams. I also wouldn't rule out the other team in Florida, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just never seem to want to give it up. But again, what can they offer? They've given up so much in the last 3 or 4 years to go for it, and obviously have won a few times, that there's not a lot in the pipeline really left to give. So it's going to be tricky for some of these teams to put together a strong package. So we'll see where that goes. In Chris Tanev's case, the other top D in Calgary that's getting a lot of attention, it's believed right now that the Flames are kind of holding out for a first-round pick. And right now, the teams that Elliot mentioned as being the ones that are in the mix and having conversations about it include the Toronto Maple Leafs, Edmonton Oilers, Vancouver Canucks, Colorado Avalanche, just to mention a few Dallas Stars in there too. It's going to be tricky. I don't see a team like Toronto really being able to do that, but maybe they offer, something there. I mean, basically right now the Leafs are not offering their first, which is why it hasn't happened. They're apparently offering multiple picks, but they're all like mid to late round. Maybe a prospect in there. That's probably not going to get it done for Tanev. Edmonton is almost certainly going to trade their first round pick, so maybe that's a deal that happens. Vancouver, we know, is very interested in doing a return to the Canucks organization for Tanev, but again, found it awfully pricey after doing the Lindholm trade. So they might have priced themselves out of Tanev by doing the Lindholm deal. Colorado's another team to watch as well, and Dallas are both looking, to get the top spot in the Central Division and looking to secure their blue line. So Tanev's definitely going to draw. I think they will get a first out of somebody, and it might cost teams being able to get him by not having or being able to give up that first rounder to make it happen. And then Philly, another defenseman to watch is Sean Walker, and according to the fourthperiod.com and Anthony DeMarco, they're actually having contract extension talks. It's not 100% given that Walker gets traded. I know a lot of people thought he would after the arrival of Jamie Drysdale. It's still possible. They appear to be about $1 million apart. Apparently, Walker is looking for around $5 to $5.5 million on a multi-year deal, and the Flyers are more comfortable at $4 to $4.5. So there's a good gap there for sure. Obviously, Walker is a coveted defenseman amongst the players that are available on the trade market right now, but maybe the Flyers hold off and maybe they try to move Ristolainen in the summer, because obviously Ristolainen is going to be out for an extended time right now, and he might be the preferred player that they move instead of Walker, which is what was being discussed before, the Ristolainen injury. And because of the situation with that and them being in around a playoff spot, maybe Walker doesn't get dealt. But at the same time, you got to think Danny Briere, who's still a fairly new GM, but looking at the future of this club, if they get an opportunity to get a really high draft pick out of Sean Walker instead of signing him to a multi-year deal at late in his late 20s, as I know he's been a good fit there and everything, but you really got to look out for your team's future. And I don't see how they do a new contract instead of trading him. I don't think I would really go down that road at all. But I'm not the GM, so we'll see what happens there. Your thoughts on all of today's news down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.